Also live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on YouTube. So we are live on all of our platforms. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, or pretty much what is top of mind for me lately, which is summer 2024 recruiting, because that's kind of the what's going on right now, right? That's the peak season of recruiting, is all the sophomores that are currently recruiting for summer 2024. So that's what we're going to be talking about, and specifically how our students for this cycle have already collectively gotten over 50 offers from top firms, both on the sell side and the buy side. Okay, so we've got offers from Goldman, Morgan Stanley, JPMorgan, Evecore, Centerview, PJT, Perella, Bank of America, Citi. We've also got people who have offers from buy side firms like KKR, Ares. Both of those are mega fund private equity firms, for those of you who are not familiar. And then we've also got people who have offers from hedge funds like Citadel, as well as Point 72. Okay, so bottom line is this: our students are seeing a ton of success so far with their summer 2024 recruiting process, and it's definitely not early anymore, but it's also not too late, I would say, for people who are still looking to get offers. I would say we're probably about 1/3 of the way through, well, maybe 1/4 to 1/3 of the way through the summer 2024 recruiting process. Okay, so like if we use a baseball analogy, we're probably in like the second or third innings. Okay, now with that said, the way that investment banking recruiting works typically is the longer it takes you to get the offer, or like the later innings that you have to go to get the offer, typically the worse the offer is going to be, right? So for example, most, if not all, of the elite boutiques have started giving out offers. Bulge bracket banks, some have also started giving out offers, although I would say that in our experience, like elite boutiques will probably finish recruiting by the end of this semester. So by the time you're done with your sophomore year, elite boutiques are going to be done for the most part. Bulge bracket banks will probably be done as a whole probably at the end of your sophomore summer. Okay, so you have a little bit of a longer runway for that. And then going into junior year, if you're still recruiting at that point, then you're probably looking at middle market banks, right? And then beyond that, like hopefully you don't last all the way until the second semester of your junior year. But if you're still recruiting that late in the process, then you're probably looking at regional boutique banks. Okay, so long story short, offers are starting to come out. A lot of our clients are very, very glad to be done so quickly, but we also definitely still have, I don't want to make it sound like this is like all of our clients or even the majority of our clients. I would say the majority of our clients are definitely still going through the process, just like a lot of you are as well. And so it's not time to freak out, but it is the time to start having a sense of urgency. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about, how our students have been able to have so much success, and also, just I want to spend the majority of this time answering most of your guys' questions. I'm going to be on here for about an hour or so. I'm going to try to get through as many questions as I can. And usually we're able to get through everything within an hour. But if not, I'll also try to stay on a little bit longer afterwards if needed. Although I probably can't stay too much longer because, I do have to spend time with my wife and my kids after this. So let's just dive right into it. And I see questions are already starting to come in on YouTube and on LinkedIn. If you're on Instagram, feel free to also drop your questions in the comment section if you have questions. I'm just going to be taking turns rotating through the different platforms and answering everyone's questions. Now, if you you can ask whatever you want. And like primarily, we're focusing on summer 2024 recruiting, but obviously, like if you're a freshman, if you're a junior, if you're a senior, if you're not a sophomore and you have just questions about recruiting in general, like feel free to ask as well. I'm happy to answer any and all questions related to investment banking or buy-side recruiting. While you guys are kind of dropping your questions down in the comment section right now. And while we're populating the queue, let me just kind of quickly introduce myself so you guys know who you're even listening to, especially for a lot of you who are probably new to our channel. My name is Sam Shah. I'm the founder of Wall Street Mastermind. We've been around for about 5 years. We've worked with almost 900 students during that time. And, we do pretty much one thing and one thing only, but we do it very, very well, which is we help students like you get both jobs in investment banking as well as jobs on the buy side. Okay. And that includes primarily private equity, growth equity, hedge funds, and to a slightly lesser degree, venture capital. But that's primarily what most of our clients are after. And, we are very, very good at what we do, or we've gotten very, very good at what we do to the point where we are the only company of our kind in the entire industry to, one, offer a money back guarantee. We've been doing that for over a year. No one else that I've seen offers that type of guarantee, which basically our money back guarantee states that as long as you do the work that we ask you to do, if you don't get a job, we'll give you a full refund, right? That's one of our offers. And then more recently, we come out with a second newer offer, which is, historically, like one of the things that's stopped a lot of students who really want to work with us from working with us is, they either were afraid that they couldn't afford it, or, they just are, worried about the price. Right. And so we understand that not everyone can, not everyone comes from, wealthy families and lots of money and whatever. And not everyone can afford a very high touch, high quality service like ours. And so we now have a new offer, which is essentially our form of financial aid. Now, obviously, just like any financial aid, it is limited. We can't give it to everyone, and you do have to apply. But essentially, the way we offer financial aid is by structuring the investment to our program as more of a income share on your future earnings. And so, you can pay a lot less upfront, right? Something that fits within your budget. And then we restructure the rest of the payments as a percentage of your first year base salary, a very small percentage of it that you would only pay if we get you the job, and only after you start getting paid, meaning you would pay it out of your future investment banking paychecks. So if you have very little money right now because you're a broke college student, it doesn't matter, right? Because once you start working in banking, you're going to be making lots and lots of money, right? Average first year analyst is probably making between $150,000 to $200,000. So just think about that, right? That's a lot. It's probably more money than you've ever seen, and you're not going to need to live on $150,000 to $200,000 a year, right? Right out of college, especially. So we've been doing that for about a month and a half or so. Officially, probably it started at the beginning of March, and we've just gotten an overwhelming response where we've gotten a ton of interest from students who have always wanted to work with us and couldn't do so before, but now all of a sudden this allows them to do that. So based on that, it was really kind of like a test, but based on that response, we've now decided to stick with that offer, and we're gonna start offering that to anyone who can demonstrate a financial need, basically. Okay, so that's a little bit about us. I think I say all this not to tell you that you have to work with us or whatever, but the distinction that I think you should have is that the only our program can only structure our offer like this and only charge people this way if we were extremely good at what we do. If we were very, very confident that we're going to get most of the people that we work with actual jobs, because we're not a charity. We, are not going to spend, a ton of time working with every single student, because that's our model, is we spend a lot of time with each individual. We're not going to do that only to not get paid and lose a bunch of money. Right. And so if you really think about it, your career is super important. And if you are going to hire someone to help you get the best job possible, you want to make sure that they actually know what they're doing. Because if you choose the wrong program to help you, then unfortunately, you only get one chance to recruit, right? If you've realized at the end of that process that, oh, actually I chose the wrong program, what it actually costs you is not what you pay for the program. What it actually costs you is well, now you are not going to be able to work in banking ever. Right. And so that's just something to keep in mind. I really, wish that more programs out there would structure their offer the way that we do. But unfortunately, a lot of programs out there aren't very good. So they're just never going to do what we do. Right. So anyway, that's a little bit about us. If you guys are interested in learning more about that, feel free to reach out to our team. You can DM us on Instagram, DM me on LinkedIn. Those are usually the two best ways to reach us. But with that said, let's dive into the questions. All right. So let me start on, I think the first question that came in was on YouTube. So let me start there. So it says, should I be worried if I haven't had any first round interviews yet? Are top firms still reaching out to candidates? Okay. So this is a good question. I think top firms have definitely started reaching out to candidates, but like they're not done hiring yet, right? Like it's kind of going back to what I said earlier. I think like elite boutiques and bulge bracket banks have both started reaching out. Okay, at least like the vast majority of them. I wouldn't say all of them, but also like, you know, some of these firms, like just because they've started reaching out doesn't mean that they're gonna, you know, stop reaching out to more candidates after this. Like some of them also have multiple rounds or multiple cohorts of super days. And so it's kind of hard to answer like whether you should be worried or not. I would say like if you haven't gotten any first round interviews, then yeah, like chances are more likely than not, there's probably something that you're doing that's, you know, not giving you traction. Right. And then so I think what's important is I'll put it two ways. Like one, it's not so late in the process where it's impossible for you to get offers from a top firm at this point. Like it's far from that. But at the same time, you definitely don't want to just keep doing the same things that you've been doing, and then like, you know, hoping for a different result, right? Because if you've, especially like if the sample size of firms that you've been applying to is actually pretty large, then like the definition of like, you know, continuing to do the same things while expecting a different outcome, like they say that's the definition of insanity, right? So you need to figure out like if you're not getting interviews, there's probably only two possible reasons, right? One is like your resume is not good enough. And so people like when people, you know, compare your resume to all the other applicants that they have, you're just not competitive enough on paper. That's one, right? Two, is you're not networking enough or you're not networking well enough. You don't have people at these firms that are willing to vouch for you or refer you and help you get these interviews. Like those are the only two levers that matter when it comes to getting interviews. And so it could be one of those things that's hurting you. It could be both of those things. So you have to like be really honest with yourself about which one of those two things might be preventing you from getting interviews right now. And if you can figure that out, then obviously like, and if you know how to fix it, then obviously fix that thing ASAP. But if you don't know like what's stopping you or you can't figure it out on your own, like a lot of times that's the case too. Is like obviously you feel like you're doing everything to the best of your abilities, right? Because why wouldn't you be, right? And so like if you feel like, hey, I'm already doing everything the best way that I know how and it's still not working and I don't know what's going on, then that's when I would highly encourage you to get some help. Like you can reach out to us or reach out to anyone else. Like you need to just do whatever is necessary to figure out what you're currently doing wrong. And a lot of times, like if you talk to someone who's experienced, for example, like we've worked with, you know, like I said, close to 900 students at this point. A lot of times, like it's not hard for us to pinpoint or diagnose like exactly what's wrong, right? And versus like you banging your head against the wall and like trying to figure it out and pulling your hair out, like we can just point you in the right direction and then like you can figure it out just like that, right? So that's what I would say about that. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me go to the next question. All right. So process have moved up so much. Yes, it has. I guess that's not really a question. So, but I would just agree with that. And what's the next question? Let's see here. What is it a student can do to get the first interview? I get that your course may prep someone for the interview, but how will it help for getting one? Yeah, it's a good question. So we don't just help people prep for the interview. We actually also do help people get interviews because like if our students are not getting interviews, then it doesn't matter how much we prep them for the interview, like you said, right? So like we have to help people solve both problems. And then so going just kind of like going off of like what I just said for the previous question, because the other person was also struggling to get interviews. Like I said, there's only two things that matter when it comes to getting interviews, right? Like one is your resume strong enough? So like, for example, a lot of times our students come in and they don't have any relevant experience or they have very little relevant experience. And so like, if that's you, then typically the first thing we'll do is like, we'll go out and we'll show them how to go out and actually get some relevant experience so that they can actually have more substance on their resume, right? So we'll show them like where to go find these internships, how to apply to them, how to get the interviews, how to pass those interviews. So it's not just about like getting your junior summer internship or getting your full-time offer. Like even before that, you have to get other, we call them like stepping stone internships, right? So helping people with that is a big part of what we do. Some people, they come in, they already have some relevant experience, but like they're just not talking about it the right way. Whether it's like in an interview, yes, like in an interview setting too, but also like they're not talking about it the right way when they're networking, and also they're not like talking about it the right way on their resume in terms of like the way their resume is formatted or the way that they write about these experiences, the way they're packaging it and presenting it to the people that are vetting you, right? So knowing what it is that bankers are looking for and what they like to see, and then like kind of catering to that is also a big part of it, right? So that's like the first part, which is like your resume. And I'm going to lump in like your LinkedIn profile, your cover letter, like all of your application materials. I think like those are all part of what we consider to be like the application process, right? And then the second part of that, like I said earlier, is like the networking aspect, right? And then so like on a networking aspect, it all comes down to like how many referrals can you get, right? And so like we always tell our students, for every firm that you're applying to, you want to, well, at a minimum, you need at least one referral. Okay, let's just start there. But ideally, if you can, you want to try to have more than one referral. Like ideally, I would say the sweet spot is probably like 2 to 3 referrals. And so there's a lot that goes into getting a referral, right? So for example, like who do you reach out to in the first place? That would be like the top of your funnel, right? Who do you reach out to? Everyone starts with like school alumni, sure, like that's the low hanging fruit, right? But like aside from school alumni, like what else? And also like if you don't go to a target school, you might not have a lot of alumni you can start with, right? So what else do you do, right? So who do you reach out to? How do you get their contact information? What do you say when you actually reach out? A lot of people send a lot of emails or LinkedIn messages, and they don't get any responses, or they get very few responses, right? So how do you like reach out in a way to, maximize your response rate? I think that's like inversely correlated with how much outreach you're going to have to do, right? Just to get people to actually talk to you. And then if people agree to talk to you and they agree to get on these calls with you, what do you actually talk to them about to actually get them to give you a referral? So like you essentially have like usually a 20 to 30 minute window to like win this person over, right? And then so 2 things have to happen. 1, you have to get them to like you as a person, and then 2, you have to get them to be impressed by you, right? And essentially like 3, you also have to make sure you're talking to the right people, because like sometimes people like you, they're impressed by you, but they don't really have any influence because you're not talking to the right people. And so all they can do is like maybe give you some very high level generic advice, which is not really what you're looking for, right? And so like what to talk to them about and who to talk to, that's a big part of it. And then how do you get them to like proactively do the thing that you want them to do, which is like, how do you get them to proactively offer to refer you? Because realistically, and from like an etiquette standpoint, you can't just come out and ask them like, hey, can you please refer me, right? Like, or at least you're not supposed to do that. And if you do that, it won't be very effective. Okay. And then like last but not least, like even after the initial conversation, like a lot of times you have to nurture that relationship. You have to follow up with them. You have to keep in touch. You have to stay on their radar. Sometimes the application for their firm's not really open yet. And then so like you want them to not forget about you by the time the application actually does open. So I just listed off like probably 6 or 7 different steps to what we call the networking process. And every single one of those steps can be and needs to be optimized, right? Like if your conversion rate for any of those steps is low, that's going to bottleneck like how many referrals you can actually get. So how do we like basically undo those bottlenecks or deconstrain this funnel that you have so that you can get as much throughput as possible? Like for every 100 bankers that I reach out to, how many bankers can I actually get a referral from, right? At the end of the day, that's the key, because you guys are already super busy, especially in the middle of recruiting, juggling that with your schoolwork, with your internships, with your interview prep, with your extracurriculars. Like there's just a lot going on. And so it just comes down to like, how can you be as efficient as possible when it comes to securing these referrals, right? And if you're not getting any referrals right now, or if you haven't gotten any referrals and you're wondering like why you haven't gotten any interviews, then I can tell you right now, like that's probably why, right? Because it doesn't matter how good your resume how good your resume is. In our experience, if you're not able to get referrals, the chances of you getting selected for interviews is going to be very, very low. Okay. So, that's that question. Let me go to the next one. That's weird. These questions are kind of coming in out of order. So let me go to the next one. I'm an incoming CS IBD analyst. What should I do? Silent from HR/teammates thoughts. Yeah, what we've been advising all of our students that had offers from CS is you got to start looking for backup offers. There's no guarantee that you're still going to have a job. A lot of them probably aren't responding because they don't know, and they don't even know if they're going to have a job, right? And UBS has already said that they're going to lay off like a huge amount of people, and I think like usually in a merger like this, the majority of the cuts are going to come from the company that's being acquired, not the company that's doing the acquiring. And so my understanding from everything I've read is that UBS is only going to keep select parts of the Credit Suisse team where, maybe Credit Suisse has a good team and UBS either doesn't have a team or their team is not good, right? And so depending on what team or what group you're going to, like the team that you have an offer from may not fit that criteria. So I would absolutely be looking for backup offers right now. I would assume the worst and assume that your offer is not safe. And if you get another offer and then like your offer ends up being safe, you can always cross that bridge when you get there, right? But these are like crazy times, especially for people who got an offer from Credit Suisse. So like, yeah, I would not sit around and wait. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Let's go to the next question. Okay, what is the best way to get internships this summer at this point with no contacts? I'm aware that it is super late. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about summer 2023, it is late. I would like it depends, right? Like at this point, and I also don't know if you're talking about like sophomore summer internships or junior summer internships or what year in school you are. But regardless, like if you're recruiting for a junior summer internship this close to the summer, you're looking at it's only the smaller firms that are going to be left. Like you're looking at regional boutique banks. You can reach out to. You're gonna have to network your way in. By the way, most of the time with these smaller firms, a lot of them don't even post applications. You're gonna have to like basically like do cold outreach and network. You can also, but you also have to like I would say this late in the process, you probably want to be casting a wider net. Right. So like you probably want to also reach out to like, for example, private equity firms, right? There's small private equity firms. You also want to be reaching out to other like relevant roles to banking, because what you can do is also like if you do something that's relevant enough for the summer, you can always try to leverage that to recruit again for full time. So for example, corporate development, which means you're doing M&A in-house at an actual company. You can do valuation. You can do equity research. You can do any type of investing role, like any job where you're actually doing something transactional, like M&A work, right? Which is why I said private equity and corp dev, or you're doing like valuation work where you actually have to value the company. You have to put a price target on their stock price, and you have to be able to, back up, your point of view. Like that can all be spun into relevant experience. And so I would just be casting like a very, very wide net. I mean, corporate banking can also be considered to be relevant. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do. You got to, at this point in the process, like leave no stone unturned, right? And you got to do a ton of cold outreach. Like don't just wait for people to post jobs on LinkedIn or on Glassdoor or on like these major job sites. Like if those are the only, or even on Handshake, like if those are the only jobs that you're applying to, it's probably not going to work, right? And those jobs that are posted, they typically have the most competition too, right? So that's what I would do. But also, look, a lot of this also depends on like I don't have your resume in front of me. I don't know how qualified you are. Like a lot of this comes down to like what's realistic is also going to come down to what you already have on your resume at this point. Because if you have like nothing on your resume, I would probably recommend something entirely different from what I just said. Okay. Let me go to the next question. Hey, Sam, how are you? One question. If I'm graduating June 2024, should I even consider 2024 summer internships, or should I focus on full-time recruiting? I became interested too late in IB. Yeah, I would not be focusing on summer 2024 internships if you're graduating June 2024. The firms that are recruiting for summer 2024 internships right now will not consider you. Like you are not an eligible candidate. If you look at the job postings for the summer 2024 internships, they will all say like they're looking for people that are graduating at least December 2024, if not May or June 2025, right? So if you really want to go for summer 2024 internships, then what you're going to have to do is at least take one extra semester in school and delay your graduation to December of 2024, in which case that would reclass you from being a junior to being a sophomore for recruiting purposes. And at that point, you'd be eligible for summer 2024 internships, and you could recruit for that. So, like, we've had a lot of students in Wall Street Mastermind that have done that for the exact same reason that you're talking about, which is they started recruiting too late, or they realized they wanted to do IB very late in the process. And so they didn't really have a choice, right? Otherwise, I would focus on full-time recruiting, while keeping in mind that full-time recruiting is going to be a lot harder. Okay. Full-time recruiting is going to be, just have a lot fewer spots, right? Because they're first, like for full-time 2024, they're going to first give priority to the summer 2023 interns at the end of their internship. They're going to give return offers to all the interns that did a good job over the summer and give them first priority, right? And then like only if those interns don't take their offers and there's still offers left over, then they will basically do another round of full-time recruiting to fill the last remaining spots. And usually that's going to be like maybe 2 or 3 spots. Okay. And so like, it's just a lot fewer jobs available for full-time. So it's not impossible, but it is more competitive. And you do need to have an even better resume because you're going to be going up against a lot of other folks who also have already done a summer internship that's highly relevant, potentially at a different bank. And so the level of competition also goes up as well. Okay. Nur says, hi, Sam. Can I schedule a coffee chat with you? Nur, unfortunately, I don't currently have bandwidth to take calls with students that are not already in our program. Like, as you can imagine, I spend the vast majority of my time outside of doing like occasional Q&As like this. I spend the vast majority of my time coaching the students that are already in our program. And so like I have my hands completely full with that. And that's really where most of my attention needs to be because these students have, put their trust in our program to join our program for my coaching. And also like, obviously we have other coaches on our team, but I'm the head coach. Right. And so that's where all of my time and effort is going to. And so unfortunately, I don't have time to jump on calls with people that are not in the program. However, we do have other team members on the team who can jump on a call with you to answer whatever questions you may have about recruiting or about our program. So I would recommend that you start there. But, if you have questions, you can also feel free to message us either on our Instagram page or you can also DM me on LinkedIn. And, I do try to find time throughout the day, just in between coaching calls and meetings and things like that to respond to as many messages as I can. So those would be my suggestions for you. Yeah, I apologize, but unfortunately that's just like my schedule is super full right now. So, okay. So that's that question. Let me come over to Instagram and see if we have any questions here. If you guys have more questions, feel free to continue to drop them in the comment section, whether you're on Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube. I will, like I said, continue to answer as many of these questions as I can. All right. So on Instagram, Chasing Great says, what is the best way to find internships for this summer if I missed out? I guess this is kind of a similar question as the one that I just answered earlier. But one, I would cast a wider net. Like I said, don't just only stick to investment banking, but also look at other relevant fields that are tangential to banking that will still allow you to pivot back into banking down the road. And then the second thing is that I don't know if you're doing primarily cold outreach right now. If you're not, that's got to become your primary way of applying for these things. And so don't just resort to, again, applying to jobs on the major job websites and things like that. Okay. Because that's not going to be the most effective thing. Let me scroll down and see if there are other questions. Is recruiting process different as an international student needing CPT or OPT? Yeah, this is a great question. It is slightly different. It is harder if you are an international student that is on CPT or OPT. Basically, the reason why it's harder is as an international student, you are more limited to the bigger banks, right? Because like primarily the bulge bracket, elite, boutique, and middle market banks, I would say like for the most part, the top 50 banks out there, or top 50, top 75 at most, that are typically even open to the idea of sponsoring, Okay. There are even some of the bigger banks, they'll just say like they won't sponsor at all. Right. And so to start, like you have a smaller pool of banks that you can even be eligible for. But then even the banks that do sponsor, they sponsor on like a very selective case by case basis, right? Like they don't just sponsor anyone because there's a lot of hassle for them to sponsor a candidate, I guess. Like so they have to go through the entire sponsorship and H1B lottery process. It's just an additional cost for them from both like a human resources standpoint and also from like a financial standpoint. And so they will do it. In our experience, they will do it, but only if they feel like you are a candidate that's actually worth sponsoring. And so basically, like that's the different. That's just like that's just like the same thing as saying the bar is going to be higher for you as an international student as it would be for like someone who's maybe a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. Okay. And so is that fair? No, not really, but it just is what it is. Okay. That's just the truth. Um, and also the other tricky part is like figuring out what firms actually sponsor. So like this is a very common question from international students because they want to like, okay, well, if not all firms sponsor, like which of the firms I should focus on? I would say like always check the job postings. If the job posting says sometimes the job postings will explicitly say that they don't sponsor, in which case like you can just forget about it because they're already saying that up front, right? But more often than not, the job postings will not explicitly say they don't sponsor. In those instances, in our experience, what that actually means is that it depends, right? And so like a lot of times what we'll actually see is that um, different students will get different answers from the same firm when it comes to this question. Like they'll ask people at the firm if they actually sponsor international students, and then like international student A will hear that they don't sponsor, and an international student B will hear that they actually do sponsor. So then like it's like, well, why are they getting different answers? And usually it's just because international student A is actually not that good of a candidate, or sometimes they're just like they're decent, but they're not like great, right? And like if you're just decent, there's so many other decent candidates that don't need sponsorship already. So telling you they don't sponsor is kind of just like the nice way to let you down, right? Versus the student B, international student B, who is being told that they do sponsor. Usually it's because they're a much stronger candidate and the firm is actually interested in them and the firm wants them to apply. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Like a lot of people are like, hey, do you have a definitive list of which firms sponsor and which firms don't? It's like, no such list exists because it's pretty much on a case by case basis, right? So like as an international student, long story short, you're going to have to, a lot of that stuff is out of your control, but what you can control is you have to focus on doing everything you can to be the best candidate you could possibly be so that, you get more firms who are willing to actually sponsor you. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. And then the last thing I will say about international students is that from a timing standpoint, from a recruiting timeline standpoint, you also have less time, right? Because again, if only the bigger firms will sponsor you, and you also, like going back to what I said at the beginning of this Q&A, like the biggest banks tend to finish recruiting the earliest, right? So like elite boutiques tend to wrap up by the end of the sophomore, by the end of sophomore year. Bulge bracket banks as a whole, as a category, tend to finish by the end of your sophomore summer. And then middle market banks, the rest of like the top 50 banks, let's call it, tend to finish by the end of your first semester of junior year, right? And so like each month that passes, there are fewer and fewer banks left that are still willing to sponsor candidates. And then so like the pool of firms that you're going to be able to apply for is constantly shrinking month after month, right? And then like past the first semester of junior year, like you're probably pretty much out of firms that will sponsor at all. And then so at that point, it's like, then there's really like almost nothing you can do, right? I mean, you can, obviously recruit for full-time, or like, every now and then we do, like we've had students that have been able to find smaller regional boutiques that ended up being willing to sponsor them. So I'm not saying that's impossible. Like there are exceptions. There are exceptions to the rule, but like at that point, it's almost like there's so many smaller firms out there, and you're trying to find like the one or two firm that actually is willing to make that exception. And so you're looking for like a needle in a haystack. And so it's just a lot of work, right? So then at that point, you might have to like try to find something else that's still relevant to banking and then try to pivot back in doing full-time recruiting, which again, still not going to be a lot of offers, but at that point, you don't have a whole lot of options, right? So that's kind of, those are my thoughts on, how to like things to keep in mind as an international student. So hopefully that's helpful. All right. Let's see what's the next question here. So Patricia has a follow-up question. Thanks, Sam. Would you recommend taking one extra semester to be eligible for summer 2024 internships or recruit for full-time opportunities? I would say like all else equal, meaning like, if you are indifferent between the two options, then summer 2024 internship recruiting is going to be a lot easier than full-time recruiting because it just goes back to what I said earlier. Like there's a lot more jobs available for summer 2024 recruiting. Like think of summer internship recruiting as, when 100% of jobs are still available. And at the end of that summer, 80 to 90% of the jobs are going to be given to those summer interns. And then the last 10 to 20% of the jobs that don't get filled by those interns are still going to be like, they're going to go back and re-recruit to fill those spots. Right. So it's like, would you rather have 100% of the opportunities available to you? Or would you rather have only like 10 to 20%? Right. And also when I say 10 to 20%, like it depends on the market conditions because like this past full-time recruiting cycle for the current seniors who are graduating in 2023, for example, they had to recruit for full-time at the end of summer 2022. And at the end of summer 2022, which is like, if we go back to like say 8 months ago, that was when like the markets were in free fall, right? Like the stock market was dropping, deal flow was drying up, all the banks were like starting to tighten up and cut back on hiring. And so like a lot of banks didn't they didn't even offer a lot of their interns return offers because they didn't have enough jobs. So if they didn't have enough jobs to give out to their summer interns, like they're definitely not going to be doing full-time recruiting, right? Because ideally they want to give as many interns return offers as possible, right? Because it's also really crappy for their interns to like spend a summer there and not get a return offer. Like a lot of times it screws those interns over, and that prevents them from ever being able to work in banking, right? And so if the market conditions are bad when you are going into senior year, which like no one has a crystal ball, like we don't know what's going to happen like 4 months from now, right? Then full-time recruiting is going to be even tougher. Then it might be even less than 10 to 20% of the spots, right? So like all else equal, I would say summer internship recruiting is always going to be way easier. Now, all else is not always equal, right? So for example, if you have to take an extra semester in school, you're probably going to have to pay for an extra semester of tuition and living expenses. And so depending on what school you go to, that could be very expensive, right? Also, like, sometimes, I don't know, like someone was asking about international students earlier. Sometimes international students don't have the option of being able to delay graduation. Or sometimes, like, even if you're not an international student, like depending on your academic requirements, your school may not allow you to stay an extra semester, right? Because like to stay an extra semester, usually it means like you either have to take fewer classes each semester. So like whatever the minimum amount of credits is each semester, like you might have to kind of like slow down the pace so that you take longer to graduate, right? Your school may or may not allow that. Or sometimes people pick up like a double major so that now there's actually more academic requirements that they have to fulfill, and they use that as an excuse to delay graduation. Or sometimes like we've also seen people just take like a gap semester, like they take a semester off school if their school allows them to do that, and then they go and work full time, like do an internship for 40 to 60 hours a week or whatever instead. And like that, they also use that opportunity to build their resume. So those are like typically the things that we see people do. But like if you can't do any of those things for whatever reason, then like delaying graduation might not be an option for you, right? So that's why I say like all else equal, definitely summer internship recruiting is way easier. The other thing to know about why summer internship recruiting is easier is because if you do recruit for full time, going back to what I said earlier, they're going to give return offers to their own interns first, right? So what happens is like every group gives as many return offers as they can to their interns, and then some groups are going to be completely full. So then they're not going to recruit for full-time at all, right? And then some groups might have like 1 or 2 openings, right? Because they didn't fill their entire class. And so only the groups that have remaining spots are going to recruit for full-time. But what that also means is like you have to be able to like figure out which groups are the ones that are actually recruiting. So it's not like summer internship recruiting where every single firm has applications. They always post the applications. You know definitively who's recruiting and who's not. In fact, like everyone's recruiting for the summer. Like the only reason why a firm would not be recruiting is if you apply too late and they already finished, right? For full-time, it's almost like playing like whack-a-mole. It's like you don't know sometimes which group is recruiting. And also like even the groups that are recruiting, a lot of times, sometimes these jobs get posted online as like an application and everyone knows about it. But a lot of times these jobs actually don't get posted. And they don't get posted because they're only looking to fill one spot or two spots anyway. And so like they don't have to post it and get like hundreds of applications. A lot of times they'll just ask the people that already work there or ask the analysts in the bullpen, hey, do you guys know anyone or any of your buddies or younger friends, who maybe currently did an internship at other banks this summer, but will want to come here for full time, right? And then like, so they'll just go through their own networks and they'll just hire out of that pool, right? And so like, this is where for full-time recruiting, like networking becomes even more crucial because if you did not network with the right people, meaning like the people that happen to be in the groups that are hiring, you might not even be on their radar. And so when they get asked, do you guys know anyone who would be potentially a good candidate for the one spot that we have left? Like no one's even going to recommend you as a candidate for that. And then because the job's not posted, you didn't apply. Those jobs get filled like very quickly. So you like before you know it, like you blink, you've already missed the opportunity, right? And so what ends up happening, if you think about it from like a recruiting standpoint, is like you essentially are going to have to try to network with every single group out there, right? So it's no longer like, do I have a referral at Goldman Sachs? And now it becomes, do I have, like you have to treat every single group within Goldman Sachs as well as every single other firm. You have to treat every single group as like its own, almost as its own like boutique bank, right? Like Goldman TMT is one bank, Goldman Consumer, Goldman Healthcare, Goldman FIG, Goldman, Energy, like whatever, like Goldman, like, every single group is its own separate entity. And it's like, you don't know ahead of time which one of those groups are the ones that are actually going to have openings. And so you almost need to get a referral. You need to win someone over from every single one of those groups. So think about how much work that is. Like, if you had 20 banks that you were targeting and now like each of those banks is 10 groups, that's like 200 different groups, which is crazy, right? And so like for all these reasons, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you try to get in through the summer internship recruiting process if you can, as opposed to waiting for full time. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Next question. How in depth should we go into the more niche topics, LBOs, accretion dilution, etc., for summer analyst interviews? I would not call LBOs and accretion dilution niche topics. Okay. It's not niche. I would agree that they're more advanced topics from a technical standpoint, right? Like in terms of, from least difficult to most difficult, I would say, accounting and like the 3 financial statements, that's usually like the, level 1. Then after that, you got to learn valuation, right? So that's like equity and enterprise value, trading comps, transaction comps, DCFs, things like that. That's level 2. And I would put like accretion dilution and leverage buyouts as like level 3. And by the way, if you want to break that up, accretion dilution is level 3, LBOs is level 4, right? So usually like I would say level 1 is like stuff that's most likely to show up in your interview and also like the stuff that you should learn first. And then level 4 is like the stuff that's least likely to show up in your interviews and the stuff that you will learn last, right? But I wouldn't say it's niche. And also like it depends on like, who you're interviewing with, right? Like if you're interviewing for elite boutiques, for example, like elite boutiques tend to have the most technical interviews. And also most elite boutiques, or not even most, all elite boutiques are more heavily focused on M&A advisory, which means things like accretion dilution and leverage buyouts are actually more relevant to what they would be doing, right? So you're definitely going to be more likely to get those questions in those types of interviews. And then also the other part is like, you know, what do you have on your resume, right? Like if you have more experience on your resume, or if you have bullet points that suggest that you should know these things, or that you should, or that like you've done an M&A deal, or you've done like a banking internship or a private equity internship where you have exposure to this kind of stuff, or you say you've built an LBO model before, then you're going to be a lot more likely to get questions on these topics as well. So there's multiple factors, but at the end of the day, like when it comes to like students that we're working with, like we don't tell them that accretion, dilution, and LBOs are like optional at all. Like in fact, we tell everyone like this is stuff that you have to know, right? You rather know this stuff and have it not come up than like not know this stuff and chance it and have it come up in an interview. Like that's how you're gonna end up, regretting not knowing more of this, right? So it's not hard. You just have to learn it, right? And like if you're having trouble with it, then there's probably something that's wrong with your approach, or you need to reach out for help. Okay. All right. Let me go to the next question. Any recommendations for Guggenheim, ECM, NYC first round interview? Yeah, I mean, if you're interviewing for ECM, you're typically gonna get a lot more like market related questions, right? So knowing what's been going on in the markets, what's driving that, being able to talk about. I mean, there's been a ton of stuff going on lately, right? What the Fed is doing, how they're trying to fight inflation, SVB, Credit Suisse, Signature Bank, like all these banks going under. Like there's so many things that are going on right now that's affecting where the market is going. And it's like having an opinion on that and having a point of view on where you think that's going and how that's going to affect the markets over the next 12 months. I think that's important. Being able to demonstrate that, you what deals have been going on in the equity markets in the last 12 months. I think that's also important. Being able to explain why you want to do ECM, especially at a shop like Guggenheim, which is primarily an M&A shop. Like why are you interested in equity capital markets? I think that's an important question. Being able to pitch a stock. I think that's also that doesn't always show up in banking interviews, but I would say like for ECM interviews, like you tend to get more of that because it's more relevant for the job. And then definitely like, having an in-depth understanding of like how the IPO process works, right? Because like if you're working in ECM, like a lot of what you're going to be doing is helping people with or helping companies and clients with their IPOs, right? So knowing like all the different steps and of the IPO process and what type of role you will play as an ECM banker, I think that's important as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, I think like those are probably like the major points I would hit on. Like, I mean, on top of like this standard typical stuff, right? Like, obviously, you still have to know your behaviorals. You still have to know your technical. You still have to be able to answer basic accounting and valuation questions. You probably don't need to know M&A and LBO stuff. I'm going back to my previous question that I just answered, because ECM bankers don't work on any M&As or LBOs. And so I guess in that sense, you have a little bit less to study, but I would probably reallocate that time to studying more of the market-based questions. Okay. All right. So that's that question. Let's go to the next one. Let's see what we got here. What should we do when we have a low GPA sub 3.0? Yeah, if you have a sub 3.0, it's going to be very, very, very hard for you to get an offer in banking, unfortunately. But it depends on like what year you are in school, like how late you are. Like if you are early enough, then I would do everything you can to raise your grades. Like raise it above a 3.0. That's like the bare minimum. Ideally, you have above like 3.7 or above is like great, no questions asked. You're never gonna get dinged for your GPA if you have at least a 3.7. 3.5 or above is like fine. Probably I would say like neutral. It's not helping you. It's not hurting you. Below 3.5, you're gonna start to get some questions around why your GPA is on the lower side. And like below 3.0, we usually tell people like people are probably like not even gonna want to interview you, right? And so at that point, you kind of had to, unfortunately, just leave your GPA off your resume. And that's going to become more of a voiceover, right? Like a lot of times, like even when people if they don't see your GPA on your resume, they're going to assume it's probably bad anyway. but it's better than showing like a 2 handle on your GPA, because at that point, like people won't even entertain like talking to you for networking or anything like that, right? So at that point, like you have to like really, really go all in on networking. You have to have a really good story and an answer prepared for why your GPA is so low, because chances are more likely than not they're going to ask you where your GPA is because they don't see it on your resume, and you're going to have to be able to explain it. And yeah, I mean, like that's pretty much it. Like it's unfortunately it's going to be very tough. So you might have to start out at like a smaller firm that is not as picky, and then try to like maybe lateral up to a bigger bank down the road. That's also a possibility. Once you're graduated and you have some work experience, people start to care less and less about GPA. But for now, while you're still in school, people are going to care about GPA. So all right, so let's go to the next question. All right, Victor has multiple questions. Let's see here. I'm a freshman at a target school, GPA 3.8 plus, that has some relevant internships throughout the school year, small PE firm plus boutique investment banking firm. With offers lined up for the summer and fall this year as well, how should I approach networking for the upcoming summer 2025 cycle for top BBs, EBs, MMs? When is the best time to reach out? From what I've heard, I shouldn't be reaching out right now since a lot of bankers are getting last minute networking calls or are reaching out in July. Yeah. So first of all, look, if you're currently a freshman, you go to a target school. What I'm hearing, like here's your profile. You go to a target school, you have a GPA that's 3.8 plus, so that's great. You already have 2 relevant internships on your resume at a small PE firm and a small boutique investment banking firm, and you also have offers lined up for your freshman summer and for the fall semester of sophomore year. That means that by the time summer 2025 recruiting starts, you'll have 4 relevant internships on your resume already, along with a high GPA, along with a target school. So basically, what you're saying is your resume is pretty much going to check all the boxes, right? So that's like extremely competitive. I'm not worried about you on paper at all. And so you're right to be thinking about networking, because that's like going to be the only thing, only other lever for you to pull at this point that would increase your chances even more. I think you already have a good shot regardless. But as far as networking goes, yeah, I would say a lot of those firms right now are, one, getting networking requests from the class above you who are currently trying to recruit for someone in 2024. And so that's more top of mind for them. So I would at least wait for them to be done with that. And then, like I said earlier, like elite boutiques finish recruiting for that first, probably by the end of this semester. Then bulge bracket banks probably by the end of the summer. And then like middle market banks probably by the end of your fall semester of this coming year. Right. But also they don't all finish at the same time. They finish kind of on a rolling basis. So you can like try to keep a pulse on which firms are already done recruiting for the class above you. Right. So that's the first thing, is like I will wait until they're at least done with that. And then the second thing is like right now, because things are so crazy in the markets and there's so many people, so many bankers that are losing their jobs, like SVB bankers that are looking to move, even though they technically got bailed out. But more importantly, Credit Suisse bankers that are all looking for new jobs. They're also getting inundated with networking emails from like those candidates who are already full-time, right? And then so like a lot of students are actually, what we're hearing is a lot of students are getting much lower response rates recently relative to like even just a couple weeks ago. So now in general, it's just like probably not, like for you, networking is not urgent. So now it's probably just not the best time to be networking anyway. Okay. But you do want to network at some point. I will wait until those firms are done with the class above you before you start reaching out to them. And then in the meantime, while you are like waiting for that to happen or waiting for that time to come, I would actually be working on all of your interview prep. I will be working on your behaviorals first, followed by your technicals, because the better your interview answers are, the better, especially your behavior answers, the better your behavioral answers are, the better you're going to do in those networking conversations when they do happen. Because like the part of the networking conversation is going to be about you asking them questions, sure. But part of it, a big part of it, is also going to be the bankers asking you questions and then seeing how you answer them. And then like it's just a more casual form of like a behavioral interview, right? It's kind of how I think about it. And so like they're gonna ask you to, tell them about yourself. They're gonna ask you like why are you interested in banking, why are you interested in their bank. They might ask you about specific experiences on your resume. And so if you have really, really good really, really good answers prepared for those questions, it's gonna be more likely for them to, one, like you as a person, and two, be impressed by you, right? So like a lot of people think like, oh, I'll prep for my interviews after I've networked and after I've actually gotten the interviews. Like, no, ideally you want to prep for the interview even before you start networking, because then that's going to help you with your networking, right? On a technical side, like similar but less important. I think like you're not going to get as many technical questions during your networking conversations. However, every now and then you do run into bankers who will just start grilling you about your technical knowledge on what's supposed to be a networking call, because some bankers, their style is like, I'm gonna cut the BS. Like, I don't even want to like small talk with you or whatever. I only care about one thing. I'm going to test you. And if you know your stuff, if you do well, I'll help you. If you don't know your stuff, I won't help you. Right. And so like for the more hardcore bankers like that, obviously it's better if you go in completely prepared with your technical knowledge, so that again, when they put you on the spot and they grow you like that, you're going to be ready to answer those questions. Right. And most of your peers are not going to be ready for that, to be honest. And so like if they're having networking calls with like 10 different students and 9 of them fail the technical question or the technical test that they put them on the spot for, and then you're the only person that passed the technical test, like who do you think they're going to refer? They're going to refer you, right? So I think like right now, that if for someone with your situation, that's what I would be focusing on. And then I would like, like people have been recommending you to do, put the networking efforts on the back burner a little bit, not by too long, but like, I will wait another probably 1 to 2 months before you start reaching out to the elite boutiques. And then maybe like 1 or 2 months after that, start reaching out to the bulge bracket banks and just kind of stagger it like that. Right. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Okay. Let me see if there are any other questions. I think I might have gotten through all the questions. And we are kind of right on time anyway, in terms of the hour. So unless anyone has any last minute questions, in which case I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, if there are no more questions, again, guys, hopefully this is helpful. But if you guys are interested in working with us and letting us help you with your recruiting process, again, we're the only company out there to offer a money back guarantee. We're also the only company out there to offer financial aid in the form of what we call like the Join Now, Pay Later program, where you don't have to pay until after you get a job and after you start in banking. Or like, better yet, if we don't get you a job for whatever reason, which is unlikely, but if we don't, you don't have to pay, right? And so like, if you're interested in any of those things, I would highly encourage you guys to reach out to our team. You can do that by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. Again, the street is abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we'll hop on with you, learn more about your situation, talk about what it is that you feel like you need help with, give you some advice on those things, just like I've been doing on this call. But also, sorry, not this call. We're not on a call right now, but just like I've been doing on this live stream. But at a minimum, we'll give you some advice. But if you actually want to work with us after speaking to one of our alum, like you'll first speak with actually like an alumni from our program who's like basically an upperclassman that's already gone through the program and recruited successfully. You can ask them for their experience, both going through recruiting as well as like their experience working with us, or just whatever you want to know in general. And then after that, if you decide you still want to work with us, and we also feel like you are the type of student that we can actually help, because we don't want to waste your time or our time, then they can set you up for a call with our team. And then we can discuss in more detail the specifics of like, hey, here's what the customized game plan will look like for you, for someone with your situation who goes to your type of school, with your GPA, with your level of connections and also interview knowledge. And then you can see if like the plan that we've laid out for you actually makes sense. And if you think it would actually be helpful, and if you do think it would be helpful, then we can move forward from there. And if you don't think it will be helpful, or if you want to take the plan that we give you and just go out and like implement it on your own, that's totally cool too. No worries, right? So that's pretty much it, guys. So again, go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST. And we look forward to hopefully talking to each and every one of you and helping you on this recruiting journey, which I know is very, very difficult. But again, like I said, So far, we've already gotten over 50 offers for our students just for this cycle alone. And by the time it's all said and done, we're probably going to have hundreds of offers, to be honest, based on the number of students that we're currently working with. So hopefully you get to be one of those people as well. And I think that's pretty much all I got. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to go hang out with my family. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these for you guys same time around this time next month. And until next time, best of luck to everyone. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.